My name is Evelyn, and from the moment I could understand words, my parents never called me by my name. To them, I was just the disappointment. That was the label they branded me with, a constant echo in the halls of our Connecticut estate. Meanwhile, my brother, Julian, was treated like a prince. He was the prodigy, the shining star of the Sterling family, the one who graduated from Yale Law at the top of his class. At his graduation party, my father stood before a crowd of 300 guests and promised him the keys to the kingdom, control of the family's $75 million investment firm, a brand new Tesla Model S Plaid, and our $15 million waterfront mansion in Greenwich. The applause was thunderous. I stood at the back of the tent, completely invisible, drowning in my own humiliation, wondering if I would ever escape the tiny box they had built for me. And then it happened. A woman I had never seen before walked straight up to me. She pressed a thick, cream-colored envelope into my hands, leaned close, and whispered, "It's time they learned the truth." In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life and everything my family believed about me shattered. I grew up in a house where affection was a transaction, and my brother Julian was the only one who ever had the currency. My father, Robert Sterling, never hid who his favorite was. Julian was the heir, the golden boy, the one destined to expand the Sterling legacy. I was the afterthought, the daughter who never quite fit the mold of the perfect, polished socialite they demanded I become. At family gatherings, I was always placed at the far end of the table. The long, gleaming stretch of mahogany separated me from them, with my father at the head, Julian at his right hand, and my mother, Celeste, hovering nearby, beaming with pride at Julian's every word. By the time I gathered the courage to speak, the conversation had already moved on. I learned that silence was less painful than watching their eyes glaze over with disinterest. My mother had a way of diminishing me with a single, perfectly arched eyebrow. I remember one afternoon when I was 15. Julian had just won a national debating championship. The house was filled with congratulations. My father raised his whiskey glass and said, "That is what it means to be a Sterling. Excellence, precision, power." He then turned to me, a cold smile on his lips. "And you, Evelyn, you managed to not spill your juice today. We should celebrate the little things." The room tittered with polite laughter, even my mother, though her laugh was more of a light exhale, as if she knew it was cruel, but had long since accepted her role in the performance. It stung in a way that was hard to describe, not because of the words, but because they had never once considered I could be capable of more. My mother often made quiet comparisons when we were alone. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" she would sigh, while inspecting my choice of clothes or my report card. Her tone was never angry, just deeply disappointed, and each remark was another brick in the wall between us. Julian flourished under their attention. He played the part of the perfect son effortlessly, charming, athletic, and ruthlessly ambitious. He moved through the world like he owned it. He knew he was the favorite and never missed a chance to remind me. When I was 17, I took a job at a local animal shelter to save money for college, something they refused to fully fund. One evening as I was leaving with dog hair on my jeans, Julian smirked at me from the staircase where he stood with our parents. "Try not to track any fleas into the house, Ev. We have a reputation to maintain." My parents chuckled as if it were the wittiest thing they'd ever heard. While I walked out the door, my face burning with shame, I pretended didn't matter. But each comment like that carved away another piece of me. The only person who ever saw me differently was my grandmother, Eleanor Sterling. She had been a formidable businesswoman in her own right, co-founding the investment firm with my grandfather before he passed. Grandma Eleanor was sharp, kind, and believed in character over credentials. When I visited her, she never asked about my grades or my social calendar. She asked what I was reading, what I cared about, what made my soul feel alive. One rainy afternoon, as we sat in her sunroom, she put her hand over mine and said, "Evelyn, never confuse their neglect for your value. You possess a strength Julian has never had to develop. One day, when the time is right, you will understand. Don't let their voices drown out your own." Her words became a secret lifeline, though I didn't fully grasp their meaning. To me, I was just the overlooked daughter, surviving in the shadow of a family that measured worth by net worth and social connections. Life at home was a constant reminder of my place. My father groomed Julian for leadership. He took him to high-stakes client meetings when he was still a teenager, let him sit in on merger discussions, and introduced him to every powerful guest as the future of Sterling Holdings. I was never included. Instead, I was told to arrange the flowers, walk the dogs, or, most often, to simply stay out of the way, as if my presence was an inconvenience to be managed. The gap between us only widened as we got older. Julian's acceptance to Yale Law was treated like a royal decree. My mother planned a gala that weekend, with a seated dinner for 200 and an ice sculpture of the Yale Bulldog. Acquaintances congratulated me, assuming I must be so proud. But behind my polite smile, I felt like a ghost, as if I had no identity outside of being Julian's sister. I was 20 when I realized I could not wait for their approval anymore. I worked 3 part-time jobs, saving every penny, building a fragile independence they never acknowledged. While Julian spent his summers interning at prestigious firms in London, I spent mine cleaning kennels and waiting tables. My parents dismissed my work as a quaint phase, never understanding it was building a resilience they could never give me. Still, the weight of their judgment pressed down on me every single day. My father's words echoed in my mind. "Evelyn, you will never be a Sterling." My mother's sighs followed me through the house. Julian's smug superiority was a constant reminder of how effortless his path had been. By the time his graduation approached, I had already armored myself for the humiliation I knew was coming. It was never a question of if they would elevate him, but how publicly and extravagantly they would do it. I prepared myself to stand in silence, to swallow my pride while they anointed Julian as the crown prince of the Sterling dynasty. What I did not know was that the life they had assigned to me, the one filled with silence and second best, was about to collide with a truth that would dismantle their entire world. I had no idea that the envelope waiting for me that day would prove my grandmother's words right, and that my silence was about to be broken forever.
The day of Julian's graduation was a spectacle from the moment the sun rose. My parents treated it with the gravity of a state occasion. My mother, Celeste, buzzed through the house, directing the staff on the placement of every champagne flute and canapé for the evening's gala. My father, Robert, stood before his full-length mirror, practicing the speech he would deliver to the gathered elite. My role was to be present but unseen. My dress was one my mother had chosen for me. A demure navy blue, she said, would keep me from drawing unnecessary attention. My place during the ceremony was in the very last row. I watched from a distance as Julian crossed the stage, his law degree in hand, his name announced to rapturous applause. My parents shot to their feet, clapping with unrestrained pride. I clapped too, but my hands felt like lead, my stomach a tight knot of dread. The real event began after the ceremony. Our family hosted an extravagant reception under a massive white tent on our estate's grounds. The lawn was manicured to perfection, string quartets played, and valets parked a continuous stream of luxury cars. Guests from the highest echelons of finance, politics, and society arrived in black tie attire. They had all come not just to celebrate Julian, but to witness the formal transfer of power. I tried to make myself small. I stood near the back, half hidden by a large floral arrangement. My presence felt like a formality. People who glanced my way offered faint, pitying smiles. I heard the whispers. "That's the daughter, isn't it? The quiet one." Then came the moment I had been dreading. My father stepped onto the small stage, a microphone in his hand, his voice booming across the tent. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, thank you for joining us to celebrate my son, Julian Sterling." The crowd erupted. Julian, standing near the front, grinned with a sense of entitlement that had been nurtured his entire life. Victor continued, his voice swelling with pride. "The Sterling name is more than a name. It is a legacy of success, of power, of vision. And tonight, I am proud to announce that Julian will be the standard bearer for that legacy. Effective immediately, he will assume control of Sterling Holdings, valued at $75 million. The keys to the new Tesla Model S Plaid are his, and this estate, our $15 million home, will be his to inherit. He is the future of this family, and I have never been more proud." The tent exploded with applause. Glasses were raised, cheers filled the warm evening air. I remained rooted to my spot. My heart sunk into the abyss with every clap. My mother leaned into my father, her smile one of supreme satisfaction, as if to say, "Our work here is done." For a fleeting second, my eyes met Julian's. He lifted his champagne flute toward me, a mocking glint in his eye. It wasn't a toast, it was a victory lap. The message was clear. I had lost, he had won. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. The humiliation was a physical weight on my chest. I thought of the years I had worked in silence, the nights I spent alone studying, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would see some value in me. But with my father's words, that hope was extinguished in front of everyone. As the crowd cheered for Julian, my mother glided past me on her way to embrace him. She paused for a fraction of a second, her voice a sharp, quiet blade. "For heaven's sake, Evelyn, try to look happy for him. Don't make a scene." Then she was gone, her face transforming back into a mask of maternal pride. The toasts continued, the celebration grew louder, and I stood frozen in place. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, trying to hold myself together. A storm of rage and sorrow brewed inside me, a tempest I had to keep hidden. I thought of my grandmother, Eleanor, the only one who had ever spoken to me as if I mattered. Her words echoed in my head. One day, the truth will have its moment. But what truth? To me, there was only this painful reality. My parents had chosen their successor, and my brother had claimed his prize. I was the spare part, the disappointment seated in the shadows while the rest of my family basked in the spotlight. The alienation that had defined my existence had never been more absolute. I had not just been overlooked, I had been publicly dismissed. My father had declared it to the world, and the applause that followed felt like a verdict. In that moment, I believed I'd just endure it, as I had endured everything else. What I did not know was that this very night would deliver something I never saw coming. It was as the applause began to die down that I noticed a woman in a tailored black pantsuit moving toward me through the crowd. She wasn't smiling or clapping. She carried a thick envelope, and her eyes were fixed intently on me. She moved with purpose, weaving through the throng of celebrating guests as if they were mere scenery. Her gaze never left mine. When she reached me, she didn't smile. She simply pressed the cream-colored envelope into my hands, leaned close so only I could hear, and whispered, "It's time they learned the truth." Before I could form a word, she turned and melted back into the crowd, disappearing as silently as she had arrived. I stood there stunned, staring at the envelope. My fingers trembled as I traced its smooth surface. For my entire life, I had been dismissed, belittled, and silenced, but no one had ever suggested there was a hidden truth. I clutched the envelope to my chest, shielding it from view. My heart hammered against my ribs. I thought about running, fleeing the tent before anyone could see me, but the woman's words held me there, the truth. The speeches on stage were winding down. Julian was now standing arm in arm with my parents, accepting congratulations. Their laughter blurred into a meaningless buzz as my entire world narrowed to the sealed packet in my hands. I slid my thumb under the flap and broke the seal. Inside were several legal documents, bound with a cover sheet and a single handwritten letter on elegant stationery. The documents were covered in official seals and notary stamps. My eyes scanned the first page, and my breath hitched. There was my name, Evelyn Sterling, not in mockery, but in bold legal type. It was a last will and testament, along with codicils and trust agreements. The document stated clearly that controlling shares of Sterling Holdings, the deed to the Greenwich estate, and several key investment accounts were all held in a trust, and I was the sole beneficiary. The documents were signed by my grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, years earlier. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the papers. I unfolded the letter and recognized my grandmother's elegant, looping handwriting immediately. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then the day has finally come. I have watched you and your brother grow, and I knew in my heart that the soul of this family did not lie in arrogance or cold ambition. I chose you because you understand struggle. You know the value of kindness because you have received so little of it. You see the humanity in people that your family has forgotten. Do not doubt yourself for a single moment longer. Everything of true value that I built belongs to you. Lead with the heart they tried to hearten. With all my love, Grandmother.
I stared at the words until the ink blurred. My grandmother had chosen me, not Julian, not my father, me. For years, I had believed their narrative that I was less than, but here was proof that the matriarch of our family had seen a strength in me they were all blind to. A wave of dizzying clarity washed over me. I wanted to march to the stage and shout it from the microphone, but a familiar fear gripped me. My father stood there, a pillar of authority and influence. To challenge him would be to declare war. But then I remembered it all. My father's smirk, my mother's dismissive sighs, Julian's cruel taunts, the years of silence, of shrinking myself to fit their small expectations. For too long, I had let them tell me who I was. This envelope was my voice. I closed the folder and tucked it securely into my clutch. The decision solidified inside me, cold and sharp as diamond. I would not be silent. Not tonight. I would not let my father's version of history be the only one that was told. The music swelled as another toast began. Glasses were raised again to Julian's future. I took a deep breath, my legs feeling both weak and incredibly strong, and I began to walk toward the stage. As I moved through the crowd, a few people noticed, their smiles fading into confusion. My father saw me approaching and his face darkened with immediate displeasure. Julian smirked, probably assuming I was coming to offer a belated, humiliating congratulations. My mother shot me a warning look, a subtle shake of her head. But my grandmother's words rang in my ears. The truth will have its moment. This was that moment. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, my pulse roaring in my ears. My father leaned into the microphone, his voice a forced low growl. "Evelyn, this is not the time. Go back to your seat." I stood my ground,
my voice trembling at first, then finding a strength I never knew I possessed. "Actually, Father," I said, the microphone amplifying my words across the suddenly silent tent, "I believe this moment belongs to me." The crowd fell dead silent. Guests froze, their glasses halfway to their lips. Julian's grin vanished. My father's eyes narrowed into slits of pure fury. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the envelope that held my family's secret. The silence was deafening. Hundreds of eyes were locked on me. My father stepped closer, his voice a venomous whisper the microphone didn't pick up. "Evelyn, get down from here now. You're making a fool of our family." For a lifetime, I had obeyed that tone, but no more. My hand, steady now, I held the documents high for everyone to see. "I'm not the one who has made a fool of this family. You are." A wave of gasps swept through the tent. Julian laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "What is this? Some kind of pathetic cry for attention? Get lost, Evelyn." I opened the envelope and unfolded the will. The sterling holding seal glinted under the party lights. I announced, "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Sterling. She chose me, not you, Julian, not you, Father. She left controlling interest in the $75 million firm, the deed to this $15 million mansion, and the majority of her liquid assets to me. She signed it years ago." The tent erupted into a chaos of whispers and shouts. Some guests stood up for a better view. Others looked at my parents with dawning suspicion. My father lunged for the papers, his face purple with rage. "This is absurd. My mother was confused. She was elderly. She didn't know what she was signing." But before his fingers could touch the paper, a clear, strong voice cut through the noise. "I was of perfectly sound mind, Robert." The crowd turned as one. My grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, emerged from the side of the tent, leaning on her pearl-handled cane but standing tall. She moved slowly but with immense authority. She turned to address the crowd, her voice ringing out. I watched my grandsons grow. "Julian, you have a sharp mind, but a mind without compassion is a dangerous thing. Robert, you built a fortune, but you forgot to build a family. Evelyn has endured a lifetime of your neglect and emerged with her integrity intact. She will lead because she understands value isn't just measured on a balance sheet, it's measured in character." The crowd was utterly mesmerized. Julian's face was ashen. "Grandmother, you can't do this. I've earned this. I've done everything right. She's nothing." Eleanor looked at him with a deep sadness. "You have done everything for yourself, Julian. That is not earning. That is taking. There is a difference." My father turned on his mother, his voice cracking with desperation. "You would hand our legacy to this failure, to the girl who could never measure up?" Eleanor's reply was quiet but absolute. "I am handing our legacy to the woman who will finally make it mean something." The crowd fell completely silent. The only sound was the rustling of the tent in the breeze. For the first time in my life, I felt the power of being truly seen. Not as a disappointment, but as the rightful heir. I turned to the audience, my hands steady. All my life, I was told I was less than. I was told I was a disappointment. Tonight, you heard my father confirm it, but you also see the truth in my hands. My grandmother believed in me when no one else did. I will not squander what she entrusted to me. I will lead this company and honor this family's name with the integrity and compassion that has been missing for too long. A few guests began to clap, then a few more. The applause spread, hesitant at first, then growing into a sustained, rolling wave that washed over me, cleansing me of years of shame. My father's face was a mask of impotent fury. He had no words left. My mother's carefully constructed composure had shattered into a look of stunned horror. Julian stood paralyzed, his champagne flute hanging limply at his side. The woman who had delivered the envelope appeared at the edge of the tent, gave me a small, knowing smile, and then disappeared into the night. She had been the messenger who bridged my grandmother's wisdom with my moment of liberation. I felt a profound clarity. This was not about wealth or revenge. This was about breaking the chains they had wrapped around me since childhood. The humiliation, the cruelty, the silence, it had all led to this moment where I could finally stand and speak my truth. I looked at my grandmother and nodded, my eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you for seeing me." She squeezed my arm. "Now, show them all what I saw." When I looked back at the crowd, I no longer saw a jury of my peers. I saw witnesses to a rebirth. I saw the end of their story for me and the beginning of my own. For the first time, Julian would not meet my gaze. The arrogance was gone, replaced with something I had never seen in him before: fear. And in that tent, under the soft glow of the lanterns, I understood the real truth. I had never been the disappointment. I had only been waiting for the right moment to show them all who Evelyn Sterling really was. The applause eventually subsided into a buzz of excited conversation. The weight of what had just happened settled over the gathering. My father's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists, his voice a low, seething growl. "This isn't over. You have no idea what you're doing, Evelyn. You'll run it into the ground." He turned on his heel and stormed out of the tent, his exit more powerful than any words. My mother followed, her head bowed, her elegant gown seeming to mock the utter collapse of her perfect evening. She had spent a lifetime cultivating an image, and in minutes it had been obliterated. Julian remained rooted to his spot, his shoulders stiff, his face pale with a mixture of disbelief and rage. He looked at me as if I were a stranger who had stolen his birthright. "You don't deserve a single cent of this. You're a nobody, a glorified kennel maid." I held his gaze, my own voice calm and steady. "Maybe I'm not who you wanted me to be, but I am exactly who grandmother believed I could be, and that is enough." The expression on his face confirmed everything. He was terrified. The unshakable foundation of his superiority had crumbled to dust beneath his feet. My grandmother stood straighter, her presence commanding the space. "This family's direction changes tonight. The firm is in capable hands for the first time in decades. Evelyn, the responsibility is immense, but so is the opportunity." Those words settled over me, a mantle that was both terrifying and empowering. I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenge. Steering a $75 million enterprise was a burden I never imagined carrying. But for the first time, I was not afraid of the burden. I was ready to meet it, not to prove my father wrong, but to honor the profound faith my grandmother had placed in me. The guests began to clap again, this time for me. The sound was different now, not just polite, but filled with a new respect. It felt like a baptism. Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the music had faded, I stepped out onto the stone patio. The moon reflected on the Long Island Sound, and the lights of other mansions glittered in the distance. For years, I had looked at this view as a symbol of a world that excluded me. Now it felt different. It felt like a landscape of possibility. I thought of the girl that I had been, hiding at the end of the table, shrinking under criticism. I thought of the countless nights I cried myself to sleep, believing their cruel words. And I thought of the woman I was now, standing there with the truth in my hands, finally free from the cage they built. The lesson was clear. Being underestimated does not define your worth. Sometimes the deepest neglect prepares you to lead with a strength no one anticipates. The labels others force upon you do not determine your destiny. What matters is the truth you carry inside and the courage to stand up when your moment arrives. My grandmother joined me, resting her hand on my shoulder. You understand now, don't you, my dear? I looked out at the water, a sense of peace settling over me. Yes, grandmother, I understand completely. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then make me proud. I took a deep breath, letting the cool, salty air fill my lungs. The fear, the shame, the years of being invisible, they no longer had any hold on me. I was not the disappointment. I was the heir, chosen not for perfection, but for resilience, for heart, for the quiet strength forged in the shadows. And to everyone listening to my story, if you have ever been made to feel less than, if you have ever been mocked or pushed aside, remember this: your worth is not defined by the voices that try to silence you. Your time will come, and when it does, the truth will speak louder than any insult ever could. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let me know in the comments what part hit home the most. And if you want more stories about overcoming injustice and finding your power, subscribe to the channel for your next dose of revenge.